Hello everyone, this is Helios Raven. I tell you how I do it, even if you don't care. And we're continuing our in-depth look into the forces of the Space Marines in Battlefleet Gothic, and we're continuing with our look at the Ramilies class Star Fort. We just finished all the special rules except for the following, which are its critical hits. Now, what happens is some of the larger defensive platforms like stations and the Ramilies have multiple hits. When it comes to taking damage, defenses and multiple hits work just like capital ships. They can suffer critical hits just like capital ships and get crippled once they have lost half of their damage points. Remember that critical hits against the Ramilies only affect the quadrant that they are scored against unless results specifically states otherwise. The Ramilies class Star Fort uses a special critical hits table opposite. And so basically you had to roll this damage table and you rolled for each critical hit done on each quadrant rather than the ship as a whole. And when it comes to catastrophic damage, once all four quadrants of the Ramilies are reduced to 0 hit points, roll a d6 to see what happens to the vast wreck. And some of the stuff that they do is ridiculous. Just for an example here, is that on a roll of a 0, on a roll of a 6, the thing basically is ripped into the warp and is replaced with a celestial phenomena. The thing is that's how powerful this thing is once it's destroyed, there's a risk of you basically blowing up, taking every ship out around it, which is pretty nice if they're all Space Marine ships. Not really good if you killed it with a boarding action or a broadside really close to the ship. So that's one key thing to keep in mind. You don't want to get close to you don't want to be close to this thing when it blows up. And now let's look at the actual stats of the Ramilies class Star Fort. It's a defensive vehicle with 12 points per quadrant, which is pretty sick since there's 4 of them. Its speed is 0, its turns are 0, its shields are 4 per quadrant. So each quadrant has 4 shields, armor 5, and turrets 4 per quadrant. So each quadrant has 4 turrets. So its defenses are pretty nice, though it is an armor 5, but still with everything else that it's got, there's really no means to complain about that. And so stat-wise, it's actually pretty nice. It's pretty beastly. It's basically got the equivalent of 4 battleships in terms of hit points, which is pretty nice. And now, in each quadrant, there is a weapon battery that has a 60-centimeter range, firepower 12, lance battery, which is 60-centimeter range, strength 5, and launch base that have fighters and bombers at 4 squadrons, which is pretty nice, to say the least. Granted, its weapon batteries are very small. Well, it's not small. It's pretty good. It's just that, like I said, with any weapon battery system, the further you fire out, the less dice you're rolling. So, at a far enough distance, you can get still a pretty decent amount of weapon battery shots with this thing, and it can hurt a lot. And it does have 5 lances, which is also pretty sweet since those wound on 4 pluses. And then the Basilica, the 4 points of the Space Fort have weapon batteries, range 45 centimeters, strength 4, firing all around. So if you're firing into one quadrant, that's an additional 4 weapon batteries, or you can split it up and 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on what your situation is. And it's also got a torpedo servo with range 30 centimeters, firepower 9 all around, which is really good as well. So, in all, it's probably one of the most beastly defensive stations that we've talked about, and probably going to be the most powerful out of all of them, mostly for the sheer fact that the Ramilies class Star Fort is just so powerful. And granted, against like a Blackstone Fortress or something, it's not as powerful, but it still is like a beast. I'd probably if I chose between the two, I'd probably take the Ramilies class Star Fort over the Blackstone Fortress. Granted, the Blackstone Fortress is really nice, but I think the Ramilies class Star Fort is just a little bit nicer. And so that's basically it for my 2 cents. Like I said, it's not really a practical vehicle to use in regular campaigns, in regular games, which is why they don't suggest ever doing that, because it's just so darn expensive and you'll probably never get a chance to use it. without making a really large force, and at that point it's going to be about half your force anyway. So if you're playing in a situation where you can get the vehicle, definitely worth picking up. If you're just deciding, to build an army, nothing fancy, then overlook the Ramilies class star for it because it's not worth it if you're just playing casual game stuff. It's only really good for like the serious campaigning type of stuff where you're going to be using the special scenarios that it works best with. And that's basically it for the Ramilies class star fort. That ends our in-depth look of the Space Marine forces, and we'll continue on to my final thoughts video. And until then, this is Helios Raven signing off.